Welcome to the Expand Your Experiences podcast. I'm your host, Rashawn Stevenson. This is a show where I deconstruct experiences and how they help us develop into the best version of ourselves. I'll be facilitating conversations discussing the frameworks and experiences that help shape our lives. Enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. I am Rashawn Stevenson, your host of the Expand Your Experiences podcast, and welcome to episode 6. Today's conversation is between me and Damien, who is the founder of the Art of Imagery. And if you're not sure of who the Art of Imagery is or what the Art of Imagery is all about, I think today's conversation is going to shine a lot of light on Damien and his incredible photography work. And believe it or not, he's actually the first photographer that I've had on the show, which is really, really exciting to me because I love nerding out about photography and taking photos and etc. Towards the end of this conversation, Damien actually asked me a few questions that I thought was really fun. We were recording and, I thought we were done, and he turns the questions on to me. So I think it gets really interesting, especially just being able to hear different perspectives in regards to photography and styles and everything about the art form. It's not just about a conversation about photography. We touch on many different topics and just kind of go into how the art form is pretty much dynamic in our everyday lives. And nonetheless, I think you'll get a lot of value. So without any further ado, I present episode 6 with the Art of Imagery. Man, Damien Smith here. Actually, this is my first time meeting Damien. I've been following Damien's work for years now. He's a Virginia photographer that I found some years ago on Instagram and just really became a fan of his work. So, Damien, I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show.
And I appreciate you having me, man. I enjoy your work too, and the commentary is always good. So, but yeah, I appreciate you, and you just always people that because I don't know, I don't want to say I don't appreciate my work, but I guess I just don't see it through the view of other people, and I don't necessarily see it as great because I'm always looking at work like yours, and I'm like, man, I wish I was there, or I wish I could have got that shot, or how'd you do that, that kind of stuff. So. I just do what I can do, and that's pretty much what it is.
So let's jump right into it. I also want to say you're the first photographer that I've actually had on the show. So man, it's kind of like a milestone. Everybody else. Let's jump into it, man. One of the things that I admire about your work is you often refer to your clients as a muse.
Right.
And for anyone who's maybe not familiar with the word muse, if someone tells you you're my muse, you're letting them know that they give you creative inspiration. That inspiration could be painting, creating poetry, or a song. In your case, it's photography. Where did you become familiar with the concept of having a muse?
So when I first started in photography, was hanging around a few other photographers, and one or two of them would say that they had a muse, and I would try to figure out what that was. And instead of asking questions, and you basically learn over time that it's usually just someone who you vibe with and who you can create with pretty much. And I've kind of developed my own sort of definition on that. And I also have a formula or a mindset on how to find one and how to develop one. But really, I try to keep. I don't want to say keep, but I try to have at least 3 to 5 muses at any given time. And the reason for that is because as an artist, there's, first of all, especially if you're trying to grow a business in art, it's important to try to have someone that can create whatever you want to create whenever you want to create it.
Yes.
So that when someone comes to you and says, hey, I want to do this, you can say, well, here's how much I charge because I have somebody else that I can create with. I don't need to create with you if I don't want to. Okay.
Yes.
But also just having especially in what I do a lot of abandoned photography, and I'm always on the go. And So I have like some of my I don't have any like criteria for everyone because all five of them have different things that they want to do, different limitations. But if I want to go and trespass in an abandoned building, like right now, because sometimes you just find a place that's abandoned and you're like, hey, I need to get in there before it gets locked up or torn down or whatever. I have four or five, people that I can just call, and one of them is going to say yes. So that's pretty much what that is, and there's anyway. I'm kind of rambling, but
No, you're good. Let me ask you. So when it comes down to it, are you often calling some of your muses to say, "Hey, I have a creative idea," or is it a mix between, "Hey, I have a creative idea, let's shoot," and someone calling you and say, "Hey, I want to do something in terms of um, some abandoned photography."
so that's a great question because one of the metrics that I use to determine if someone is muse level is after we've shot a couple of times, if they say, "Hey, I have an idea," because now you know that that person isn't just. I mean, it's great to have an open canvas of somebody that's open to whatever, but it's even better when I only have to do 50% of the thinking on that, So yeah, that's pretty much, it's both for sure.
So can you unpack? I mean, I know what abandoned photography is, just being a photographer. It's not a style that I've ever shot, but can you break that down for someone who may not be familiar with that type of photography?
So sure. So abandoned photography is exploring, and it's funny because like if I ever get a lot of times if I get caught by a owner or the police or whatever, and they ask me what I'm doing, the first thing that I tell them is I document old buildings, or
Mm,
um I document dilapidated buildings. So
mm,
then when you it's like and you I mean just as a grown up, one of the things that you learn is the words that you use are they're the key to you unlocking a lot of things and sometimes keeping yourself out of trouble. But yeah, abandoned photography is the documentation of old and sometimes abandoned structures. I guess I can't say old because old people, they would say that's architecture or whatever, but
right.
basically if a building has been vacated, that's abandoned photography. um and yes, in case anybody wants to know, like probably 90% of the time you're trespassing, you're going someplace you're not supposed to be. But if you want to ask later, we can talk about that. But I really that's pretty much what it is: shooting old buildings that are left and there's nothing inside.
Okay, so here's another question that I've always wondered when it came to you and your style. Um, you shoot beautiful people.
Mhm.
And how do you make them comfortable enough to A, trespass usually, and B, feel beautiful in a space that's abandoned? Like, how do you merge those two things together? Because I assume that, it's already a certain level of anxiety being in a space that, is abandoned. You may be approached by the police or the owner. And then you're having to capture the beauty of whoever your muse is in this abandoned place. So how do you do that?
So the first thing that I try to do in any kind of shoot is establish control. So, you were in the Navy, so you'll understand this even more than most people will. But before I go into an abandoned building with anybody or even take them to one, I give them a safety brief and I let them know, hey, yes, we are trespassing. Hey, I've been to this building at least this many times, so I know the terrain. And I also give them a egress like safety brief where I tell them here's a way out, here's a way out. So if a person comes to us, my job is to get in between you and them, and your job is to get back to the car. Unless it's the cops, and then we don't run from the police. That's pretty much like
Yeah.
what I tell everybody. And so that's part of it. Okay. The other thing is when I say establish control, I try to establish control by letting the person that I'm shooting know that this is their shoot, not my shoot. So, like, no matter what concept we discussed in advance, like it could be a fully nude concept in this place. I tell them that at any time that they feel uncomfortable, that they can change their mind. So when you establish control, but also let them know that they can have control, it creates a level of comfort that a person has with me, and then also there's some intangibles where I do have some qualities that people say, oh, this makes me so comfortable or whatever. And it might be the way that I talk to people, but I just look at people as people, and I don't get uncomfortable. And in photography, it's just a strange thing. I trust God. I mean, I know that sounds crazy, hey, you're a nude photographer, but yes, I'm a nude photographer. I trust God, and I let God kind of control the situation in that. I don't know. It's like I don't have the ability to sexualize anybody that I shoot. And that sounds strange, or maybe it sounds like impossible, but I just don't. And there's some personal things that I've experienced that have prevented me from doing that. But yeah.
I don't think it sounds strange. I think what's more strange is that we live in a society now where, you know, beauty in the form of nudity isn't is the fact that it's so taboo. I think that's more weird than a person who can capture it, through photography or through art. Because when you go back into some of, I mean, I can't name any of the artists off the top of my head, but that's what they used to do: create
Michelangelo,
sculptures.
perfect.
Michelangelo, like, create sculptures and create paintings of nudity.
Yeah.
So I think that, and I'm not like religious or anything like that, but when you say it's connected to God, I find that that's interesting because we are a creation by God. Our bodies are a creation by God. Clothes are a creation by us. So it's like, you know what I mean? It's not necessarily, I just don't think it's a bad thing, and I think it's super taboo, and I think it's taboo for no reason, and that's why I respect artists like you who are able to make it, because none of your work that I've ever seen, even though the model could be nude or she could be half nude or whatever the case is, even looking at your art, I don't even look at it in a sexual way. I feel like you do a fantastic job of doing just that, which is capturing the beauty of the muse or client.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah, so I mean, I could go on and talk about it, but we can go on to the next question probably.
So, with that being said, I mean, I'm sure that you have um, a lot of misconceptions about your work. What would you
Yeah.
say the biggest misconception about your work or your style?
I guess it depends on who you're talking about. I mean, the base misconception about my girlfriend is that I'm sleeping with all the girls that I shoot. But
Mm.
but that's obviously not a thing. Another thing, I mean, I'm not sure. Do you consider like a hate as part of a misconceptions? I mean,
I
uh,
do, because it's obviously something. There's, if you're doing something with the right intention, you're not out to hurt anyone. So if
yeah.
someone hates it, obviously it's a misconception somewhere.
So like it's interesting because I don't really think that I have. Well, I guess one of the misconceptions would be that I pay the people that I shoot, which they either pay me or I don't pay to shoot them because um, I I teach a lot of people how to model, how to get into modeling, how to be models. So some, like, I would say at least 20% of the people that I shoot were just regular people who now model because they started shooting with me. But some other misconceptions are that I don't know, like, because I would say, because okay, I'll say a general misconception about most photographers is that they're creepy. So um obviously you've seen my reviews probably, or you looked at my stuff, and you can talk to anybody that I've shot. I don't really think that. Oh, funny story actually about a misconception. I was shooting a girl last Friday. So not this Friday that just passed, but the Friday before that. And it was a sunrise shoot, and it was on a beach, and there was hardly anybody out there. And the girl that I was shooting was laying on her stomach, and she didn't have a top on, but she had her jeans on. And I don't know if you what kind of lenses you use, but I was using the 70 to 200, so I was pretty far away from her. and there was an older lady that was running along the beach, and as she got closer to my model, she leaned down to her and said, "Don't let him use you." And it's funny because, it's that's just one of those strange things where I'm like, you can tell that God was involved, because out of all the people that I shoot, I've been like, I bring new people out to that beach all the time, but this happened to be a girl who I've been shooting since 2018. So that's 4 years ago. Um, she's a girl who started out shooting regular, then she wanted to shoot nude, and then she started dating, and then she decided, hey, I don't want to shoot nude anymore. She's, you know, she's one of those people who started out with me and she models now. She applied for Playboy at one time, all kinds of things. Like, this is a person who, and she's a no nonsense kind of girl. Like, she's one of those blonde Barbie looking girls.
Mm-hmm.
She has like I wouldn't say streak, because she acts very ditzy, but she's brilliant in her mind. And she was pissed at that lady, and she almost said something to her. And it's one of those things where so I would say that's a misconception, is that just generally all photographers are creepy. Now, a lot of us are, and I understand where that stereotype or that misconception comes from, but that's another pretty big misconception. Another one is that I don't share locations. Like, a lot of people think that I don't share locations. I don't share locations with everyone. You know what I'm saying? So there are some photographers who I don't even like. There's some photographers that are on my block list and there's a bunch of different reasons why people get on my block list, but there's photographers that are on my block list that if they message me and said, hey, I want this location, I give it to them, because they're not on my block list because I don't like them. It's for other reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I assume some of those other reasons are the fact that it's creepy stuff and you want to protect your reputation and protect your muses by not allowing people to send them ridiculous messages and about your work.
So actually, no, it's not that. The reason that, so there's a few photographers that are on my block list because, in photography, there's and I have a lot of weird philosophies that are that come from me, and one of them is called imprinting. So, I try not to let photographers imprint on me. Fine, I'll take it. Sorry, my girlfriend's bringing me breakfast.
You good?
Thanks, appreciate it. So imprinting is when you follow someone and you admire their work, and because you see it so often, like, it starts to become part of you, and it's like you're copying them. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And there's so much copycat stuff in photography. I mean, like, everybody's trying to copy everybody, and I use artists for inspiration, but my thing is like, I don't want somebody who's in my backyard to imprint on me, because when you start imprinting from people that are in your backyard, like, it creates so much. I don't know. It's just not creative, and we'll talk about that because I think that's one of your questions. But anyway, yeah. So that's part of the reason why I block some people.
Yeah, I understand. It's funny because it doesn't affect me now as a photographer, but when I first started out, I did that a lot. Like, I found myself shooting or trying to shoot, things like that. But it wasn't until I realized that, one of my gifts as a photographer is what I see. It's
Right.
my vantage point. It's what I capture. And I have to stay true to that. So now it's more or less I'm able to just admire people's work that I like, but not as you call it, imprint or have them imprint on me, So I've never shot. I've only maybe probably shot one. Really I wouldn't call it nude, but there's only been one shoot that I've had similar to that,
Right.
and it's kind of not my thing. So it's like I try to admire things outside of what my realm is, which I don't necessarily feel like I have a specific category. Do you? Do you feel like your work falls in a specific category?
So, if anything, like, I mean, I'm an environmental portrait photographer, which means I just shoot people out in the world. But like but I do some studio, and so I guess when you say that's not my thing, I kind of find it funny in a way, because like, when I'm happiest, I guess, when I have a camera in my hand, and I'll try to shoot anything. And even when I'm out doing portrait shoots, like when the model is changing or something like that, I'm like in the environment, like, oh, there's a sailboat out there. Let me see if I can get a cool picture of that sailboat out there.
Yeah.
And the girls like they joke and make fun of me because I'm like, hey, I'm going to do my nerdy photographer stuff. And so yeah, so like and that's why like I love your work because you're a landscape photographer but you do a lot of street photography and some different things like that. And and because like I guess I'm a landscape photographer at heart in a way. But like basically the way that I got into photography was I was shooting a lot of sunsets because I just thought sunsets were really cool. That's why my sunset shoots are so cool because
Mhm.
that's really my thing. Like when I go out to the sunset and I take a girl out there, like I'm actually like out there like, hey, I'm out here to capture the sunset and then I'm gonna put you in it and then it's gonna be fine. And it's beautiful on both ends, It's like when there's so much stimulation in the image, there's like everything you look at is gonna be great. And that's how they feel about it. That's why they love my pictures because they're like, oh, it's not just me in this photo. And maybe that's part of it too, why people are so comfortable because they're like, oh, it's not, I'm not the only beautiful thing in this photo, but I am the most beautiful thing in this photo.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I want to get nerdy for a minute because I love sunsets and sunrises. What is it about sunsets and sunrises that, that are attractive to you? Obviously, like you said, I mean, besides the fact that they're beautiful, but for you, Damien, like how do sunsets and sunrises, like what's the impact on you? How do you view them as an artist?
So, and this is one of those things where, the power or, um, or the evidence of God is like one of those weird things that I'm always trying to observe in the world. And one of the things is that in nature, like there's no two things that are ever copies of each other. Everything's always unique, and every single sunset is unique. Um, and even sunsets that are similar are still extremely unique in their own way. And I don't understand, not that I don't understand, because I kind of understand, but it just is a marvel to me how even color grading of sunsets, just by like the atmospheric um, makeup of the day. And I tell girls like all the time, like one of the funniest things that people like if it like yesterday, for instance, it rained and it rained at like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So when it rains at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the way your mind works is it says, hey, it's raining, we're not shooting today. But when it rains, I tell girls, I message them in the middle of the day and I'll say, hey, it's supposed to rain today. And that means that we're gonna get one of the more amazing sunsets of the week. And because it's just when there's moisture in the atmosphere, and it's like I guess talking about nerdy stuff, like I kind of joke and I say I'm like a meteorologist in a way because I am I have to know what the weather is going to be like to determine what kind of sunset I'm actually going to have.
Mm.
And the sunset yesterday was insane, like it was so good. And that girl was like, I'm so glad I came out there because like even if the pictures aren't good, and this is kind of a funny thing too, is I don't go to shoots to get good pictures. And that is another thing about me, I guess that's a little bit different. I go out to create great experiences for people. And so at the end of that shoot, it doesn't matter because like I actually left my speed light at the house. And so I wasn't able to get the types of pictures that I normally would get, but I still got great pictures. So two things, I was able to stretch my legs in my photography and do some different things. And we got to share this amazing sunset and like it was so good. So little things.
Well, and again, and that's one of the reasons why I also, wanted to have you on as a guest because looking at your work, I can see that it's an experience. I never knew the nuances of what made your work so good. So I knew having a conversation with you about how you created them and how you created such a like connection between whether you're shooting on the beach or you're shooting in an abandoned building, how you always seem to capture incredible stuff. But now it makes sense to know, Especially because I have the same type of sentiment when I go out to shoot. I'm not going out to go find to shoot incredible stuff. I'm just observing the world, and I just happen to see incredible stuff, and I have my camera. That's how I get shots. Like, it's not because I'm going out like, what can I find amazing? Because what I found also is there's always something amazing going on. There's always something photograph worthy. And even if I don't have my camera, um, I often do this thing in my mind where if I see something that I would take a picture of, I pretend that like I snap it in my head, if that makes sense.
Right.
So it's almost like I'm always taking pictures whether I have my camera or not. And
Yeah.
I know that's probably something that most people might think is weird, but I think as a photographer, you probably understand why I do that.
But I guess in a way, it's like we use that terminology anyway, because, it's like we're always taking a mental picture.
Mm.
So, and that's it's a philosophical discussion about how we encode things into our memory and like why they matter. But, like kind of an aside to that is like so most of my landscapes I take with my phone.
Mm.
So like I've gotten it into the mindset of the best camera is the one that you have on you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And your cell phone can take great pictures, and it will also, I mean, I don't know about you, I don't want to like, but I just think as a landscape photographer, if you get in the mindset of just taking some landscapes with your phone, even if it's just so that can put that, and this is a weird little trick in the abandoned life, is when you take a picture with your phone, it encodes the location so you can always remember where it was. Um, but like it'll help you in your photography because your phone can actually get in places that you can't get with your camera, unless I don't know what kind of camera you have, but
Well, I think about that. I do that. I use my phone a lot. And even sometimes when I have my camera,
yeah,
I shoot Fuji film. Um, but I found that it's kind of like watching a John Wick movie, right? John Wick might use a rifle, or he might use a handgun, or he might use a knife. It just depends on,
right.
what I mean, what the situation is. So I kind of feel like my cameras are like that too. Some are going to require me to use my Fujifilm. Some are going to require me to use my phone, especially with the phones now. I mean, you can capture incredible images. A lot of times I'll shoot something and people are like, oh, what kind of camera? I was like, man, that's an iPhone. That's just my phone. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So, I mean, we talking about photography mostly here. And I remember one time, I don't know, maybe a year ago, you posted something and you had a song on there, and I'm like, and I said something to you like either what do you know about that or something jamming or whatever the case was, and you was like, man, I'm old, and that's why I know that. I'm not sure if you remember that dialogue, but I'm curious as to other than photography, what other forms of art like contributes to you and your work? Because you do a really good job of like pairing songs with things that you post too. So I'm assuming that music must be one of those art forms because you have you do a great job of meshing concepts and songs together. So is music one of those things, or what are some of the other things that contribute to your art?
So I don't think it's possible to grow up black and not have music be a big part of who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not to say that other cultures don't have a big musical influence, but yeah, music has always been a huge influence in my life. And just like it's kind of like when you say what kind of art has influenced me, art has influenced me. Like so I grew up in different places, but I was born in New Jersey,
Mm-hmm.
and then I went to high school and middle school in Richmond. And basically like I was born in the 70s, and so the music of the 70s, and then like I was literally raised in the beginning of the hip hop culture, you know what I'm saying? Like hip hop was like, or I mean, was just a big part of my dad and just everybody that I was around, and like just a lot of a lot of music just generally was a huge part of it. And then in my family, everybody was a drawer. Like I used to draw all the time, and so and then I took photography in high school for like a couple of years, which has no bearing on what I do now because I wasn't good at it then. but it was great to go in a dark room and, all that kind of stuff. And then, so yeah, just all kinds. Like I've always been a guy. Like I used to like to go to museums and like just look at the sculptures or art or whatever was in museums. So like I've always just been an observer of art or a practicer of art. I used to sing at one time. I've been in church choir, different churches I've been in. So and I have a huge music collection, like probably like 2,000 CDs probably from
Okay.
back then.
When I know you say you did 10 years in the Navy. Did you used to shoot back then as well?
So it's weird that you asked that. So the answer is yes and no. Like I never did any artistic photography until like 5 years ago.
Hmm.
So I was just the kid that was like, hey, we're going out on Liberty. Like somebody's got to take pictures, so I'll be that guy. Like I just nothing like, oh, this is a great, like I missed a lot of opportunities. Like if I knew then what I know now, like my photography, I would have taken such amazing photos. But literally, I was just documenting, experiences with people, and that's pretty much thousands of pictures of just sailors standing around on Liberty or like a boat or whatever. Yeah.
It's funny because I remember, see, for me, it was a little bit of the same. When I first traveled out of the country, I was so excited because when I was a kid, I used to always look at magazines, travel magazines, and like just fantasize about being in all these different locations across the world.
Mhm.
And so the first time I actually got a chance to go out of the country, I bought a little digital camera before going on deployment. And I told whoever was going out with me, hey, we can go out, but just know I'm going to be taking pictures. Right. And I had no real concept of, of how to take pictures. I just wanted to take pictures.
Right.
So I remember this one guy, shout out to Slim if you're listening. My Liberty buddy would always be this guy named Slim. And Slim and I would go out and I'd be taking pictures of buildings in Europe and I'd be talking about the architectural blah blah blah. He would always like give me a hard time and joke on me or whatever the case is. But now I look back at those photos and I'm glad that I was able to A, take the photos and capture that, but B, be able to have a snapshot of what my beginning work looked like just for the love of it, as opposed to now having a little bit more skill and adding that with the love. So it was good that I was able to go back and, like that I was able to take that little digital camera out there and just capture stuff.
Yeah. So like it's funny because like I usually had a disposable camera when I was in the Navy because I was in the 90s or and I it's so crazy. I remember getting my first digital camera. It's like it's just so strange thinking about that. It's just technology has advanced so far. It's like crazy. But anyway,
Because like you said, now we're just doing it with our phones and
right.
we're digital cameras and roll up cameras. I don't know. It's like you said, at the end of the day, I think the first person I heard say this was Chase Jarvis when he said the best camera is the one you have. And since I've heard that quote, I realized like you said, it doesn't really matter. Really. If you It's not the camera, it's usually the photographer anyway.
Right.
Earlier you did say something that I want to kind of circle back around on. You said you teach people how to model in most cases.
Right.
Now you've been shooting for 5 years creatively. How did you develop that skill to where you can now teach people how to model? Is it because you've done it so much that you know what looks good, or that know you have that relationship with the person so you can help bring out the best features of them? How do you do that?
So it's actually kind of funny because just as you're asking that question, I'm thinking about the answer, and it's weird because I when I say I teach people, it's I guess a better description would be I unlock the model that's in them. And it's like I feel like beauty is everywhere and every woman has a has a bombshell inside of them. And something has, limited it or it just hasn't been opened yet or whatever. And so I am really just identifying, hey, this is your thing, or hey, you look really good right there. And then and there's some other things that I do too. Like I am constantly practicing different poses. Like and I can actually look through my my history of photos, and you can see, oh, this is the time period where I was trying to get this pose right, and this is the time period where I was trying to get this pose right, and so on. And like it's almost like Karate Kid in a way, where
Mhm.
you're and I use Instagram collections to save poses and determine the ones that I really like, and I try to use them in different ways in different environments, put my different spin on them and that kind of sort of thing. And so the bottom line answer to your question is, how do you teach somebody? Is, first of all, like, I have a vision of what I want with the person that I'm shooting. So once I have that vision, I direct them in such a way that teaches them how to actually move their body. So um if you've ever watched my lives, you'll hear that I've actually done it a lot less, but you'll hear me say, is it okay if I touch you? And so some of the girls that I've been shooting like for years, they always like are like, yes, Damien, it's fine, whatever. But it's just a good habit that I have, just because the word consent is super overused in society right now. But in certain situations, consent is very important, and these women need to know that, like, before a photographer touches you, male or female, they should ask you, because that's just how it should be. Now that being said, I started posing people in terms of joints. So when I tell somebody, "Hey, I need you to move your left wrist, your left elbow, your left shoulder," they know, "Hey, I'm moving, those individual things instead of moving the whole arm," because the arm tells them nothing. Your knee, your ankle, your left hip. You know what I mean? There's some different things, and I've started learning how to pose people without touching them, just by telling them, "Hey, move this joint a little bit." And when they do that, they actually, it's funny, you can look at someone's face and you can tell that when their joint gets in the place that feels right to them, that's when the picture looks the best.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Dude, that's fascinating because, again, I'm always interested in the little nuances that of how people create. And that's actually, I'm sitting here thinking about, like, wow, that is, it is so simple, but at the same time, I can see how it A, makes the person you're shooting feel comfortable, and B, it really is making the little slight adjustments that you need to get that good shot.
Yeah.
But not only that, man, the one I shot a shoot for a boutique one time, and it was my first time shooting, models, right?
Mhm.
And I remember there was one girl who, she had on one outfit, and it was hard for her to, I couldn't get her to feel confident, right? Like, I was trying, I had like I could just tell in her face and her body that she wasn't confident. Whatever, right? She changed outfits and she turned into a whole nother person, bro.
Yep.
um it blew my mind just to see the transformation in the same person just based on the outfit. Now, what does that feel like? Is that your goal every time you go to shoot, or is it mostly when you're shooting with these models? I'm sure a lot of them know how to do it now based on your chemistry and the amount of time that you've been shooting them. But what does that feel like for you when you see that light turn to a really bright light and their whole personality is able to show, when you're trying to shoot them and pose them?
So that's funny. Like, it's definitely, I don't know if it's a goal, but it's an expectation.
Mm.
So, and I guess that's one of the things that I guess, and I'll speak to what you were just talking about here in a second. But yeah, it's an expectation that a person is going to have that moment where they feel like they are their best self in that shoot. Now, I've, like, most of the things that you see the girls wear on my shoots, I put them in, so they know, like, they don't know, like, a lot of times what they're gonna wear until the shoot. Sometimes they do. It depends, like, but I've given them concepts in advance. Hey, here's the kind of outfits that we're gonna wear, stuff like that. Um, but like, in my mind, I'm looking at, hey, this is this person's body type. These are the things that they're gonna put on and that are gonna look good. And I would say probably at least 30% of the time they're like, "Hey, Damien, this looks stupid. Why am I putting this on?" And then they go in the tent or the changing room and they come out and they're like, "This feels dumb." And then I take the picture and they're like, "Oh, that looks dope." you know? So like, yeah, it's kind of like, there is, yeah. So, but to your point, like, one of the things, like, and I can already tell, like, actually, especially like I could tell listening to your other podcasts, but also just talking to you and just the way that you are, you're you have a very high eye probably, or a high intuitive nature and high sensitivity nature to people. And in photography, those are like, so if you've ever taken a disc assessment, if you haven't, you probably should. But I'm very high, very high I, and a high S means those two things. I'm intuitive and I'm sensitive to people. And typically, when you have those two things, you're very low in D, which is like the dominance, the control. And like, so I've built my D up over time. But like, when I'm in a situation like that where I see a girl is wearing something and she's uncomfortable, sometimes you can look at it and say, oh, it's because that doesn't work for her. And as a photographer, and this is why people are comfortable with me, is because sometimes I just say, take that off. It doesn't work. So go put something else on and then see. And we'll just, and it does, and I always tell people, hey, if I put you in something and it doesn't look right, we can keep changing until we find something that works. Like, it's fine to do that. And that empowers them. And then it also adds a level of credibility to you, because you're not forcing a situation. And it's like even though you are in control, you are letting them feel in control, because they don't have to wear something that they're not comfortable in. Sometimes it's like that, and sometimes it's like, hey, they come out and they're uncomfortable, but you say, here, pose like this, and let's see it. And then you take the picture and you show them the back of the camera, and they're like, oh wow, you know. So that's kind of, yeah.
Well, that makes sense. And it made me think of another question that I'm curious to know from you. When there's so much little technical things that you do, with your work. How would you say that photography has translated? Are there any elements of photography that has translated to to your life? Like elements of how you create that you use in your everyday life, and because I'm pretty sure, like you said, being intuitive and sensitive is one of those things, and that you can that goes from your life to photography. But are there things that you've learned just through the process of photography that you can now apply to your everyday life?
So it's kind of funny, because I run a landscape crew like 3 or 4 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And a huge part of that is we take pictures of all of our jobs, like befores and afters. And so there's other crews that are out there too, and their pictures are horrible. and and my pictures are always good, and they can be used on the website or whatever, because again, landscape photographer, like, at heart, kind of, sort of, in a way. Also, um the way that I do customer service with any of my customers um is a lot of times it's the same way that I deal with the people that I work with. And it's just like, you are in control of the situation. I'm here to make you happy. And I want you to have a good experience. And how I get there, no matter how painful, is fine for me, because in the grand scheme of things, like, if you're not happy, then it's not really an experience for either of us. And I think that people really appreciate that, because, it's just like not a me thing. It's not ever about me. And even when I do any regular shoots, it's just not about me.
Well, man, I think that is that's just one of those things that's missing in most of the interactions that we have that are unpleasant. It's the person or business that it makes it about them, when it shouldn't be about them. It should be about the person who's coming there for your services. And
Right.
I'm not saying that the person, some people take advantage of that for sure. But at the end of the day, if I'm coming to you for a product or a service, I want an experience. And if you're focused on your own thing, you can't provide me the best experience that I need in that moment. So I
Yeah.
think that's huge.
So, yeah.
All right, well, we're coming down the home stretch, man, and I really, really, really thank you for taking the time to have this conversation. I'm pretty sure down the road we'll end up having another, or two or three, or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
But there are a couple things that I'm interested in terms of what's the word? Experiences. For you, if you could take photos of any person in history, or Like, is there a specific person or time in history that you would want to photograph?
That's a good question. Person. Wow. Oh man, like, cause like I'm not a big like on celebrities type of person. Like I don't, but but a time in history that I think I would like to go back and photograph is probably like, oh, that's tough too. There's a bunch, but I mean, if I could go back to like the 1940s, like right after World War II, like that's just a time that is intriguing to me, because of a lot of things, but specifically, and this is like so there was a huge explosion of Black prosperity during that time, and our people came back from the war and they had things and they did things, and they, the ladies were looking good and the dudes were looking sharp and people had things, and it's like that's a time period that I think that, just like, because if you went back to antiquity, like getting around wouldn't be the easiest. You would have to pick one place. But I feel like in the 1950s, you could get in a car and go anywhere in the country and shoot that time period. And like, kind of like, it's not much different than it is today. You know what I'm saying? It
Right.
might have even been easier back then because people had money and gas was cheap. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Um, but yeah, that's probably the time that I would want to go back and photograph. And, like if there was a person, like if I had to pick, I mean, of course I would pick a beautiful woman to photograph. And, man, there's just so many, like I would, like a Dorothy Dandridge, or like, someone that a lot of mystery, but like just all that, beauty, and, or maybe my generation, like a Farrah Fawcett type, or, something like that. But
Yeah. Another question is, what is one thing that you think everyone should experience?
so it's I mean, obviously okay. So, I mean, everyone should travel outside of the country that they live in for sure. Being in the military, I mean, obviously when I was in the Navy, I went to like 30 countries in the time that I was in. I don't know how many deployments you've done. But I've been to all of the major countries on the Mediterranean, the Middle East, part of the North Atlantic, and stuff like that. And I've traveled a little bit on my own too, like out once I've gotten out. But experiencing other cultures, it's, especially like on a day like today, it helps you really appreciate, being an American. It's different in other places. They don't have the freedom that we have. Even when people are out protesting and complaining about things, it's like still you wouldn't really want to live long term anywhere but here, I feel like. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's funny you say that, man, because I think that's probably the number one answer that I get when I've asked that question is just people saying travel, because so many things come with travel. I mean, you got the experience of the culture, you got the experience of the food, and you have so many different things, and you realize, you know, the things that you like about your country, and then you realize the things that you don't like. By me living in Japan, it's like I can look at America now with a different lens,
Right.
and there are things that I appreciate about America that I probably wouldn't have appreciated, had I not lived somewhere else.
Right.
But share all your contact information, man. Where can people find and follow your work? I'm sure now everybody who may not have known about the art of imagery, they're curious now. They wanna engage with some of your work. So where can people find you?
So yeah, Instagram is probably the best place to get me, the Art of Imagery on Instagram. My Facebook is the Art of Imagery also, but if you want to go to the URL, it's facebook.com/imagery is art, because the Art of Imagery was taken. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much it. You could probably DM me or call me or text me or whatever. My number's out there somewhere to be found. But um, and I answer questions all the time. I'm not. I'm pretty much an open book, and if people want help or info or that kind of stuff, I'm always like down to help people and stuff like that. But um, I mean, I have some questions for you though. Like
Oh, let's
if you're
shoot,
down.
man. What you got?
So like, I mean, it's kind of interesting because, and I don't want to get too personal because I don't want to get too personal, but both of my kids are partly Japanese. And so like Japan is, my my ex-wife is, I guess she's 25%, so her mom's 50%.
Mm-hmm.
And Japan, even before I met her, like I feel like, I mean, I was into the car scene since like 2005 probably. So like, Japan has always been and then growing up, like most of our cartoons that were cool, like Voltron and like Transformers, there's like Japanese cartoons, you know what I mean? So it's like being in Japan, like what would you say is the best part about being in Japan, like for you?
That's a tough one, man. I think the best thing for me is the attention to detail. Everything is intricate, right? There is nothing that you do or you see that's just unnecessary. I'll give you an example, a couple of examples actually. My apartment, right? I mean, it's not very big, but it's efficient. It's like all the space that's there is necessary, and it doesn't have unnecessary space, but it doesn't feel small. It doesn't feel crowded. I feel like I feel like before that I thought that I needed all this space, but now I realize that I don't need all that space. If you go to, like a convenience store or something like that, right? Like, I go to a 7-Eleven here. I'm in Virginia currently. If I go to a 7-Eleven here, it's not the same as going to a 7-Eleven in Japan. Like the intricacies, the details, the way that people treat you, the way that you're always being served, the way that you are always in the forefront of a restaurant. Like you're the forefront of what they want to create as an experience for you. And you feel that. You feel that with the way things are in terms of how detailed they are, how much attention you get when it comes to, someone serving you, or even just driving down the road. Like, and you just, I don't know, it's just so many things, man, to be honest, that I appreciate, but mainly it's taught me that, ways that I can increase my attention to detail as a photographer, as a podcaster, as a whatever. Like, it makes me look around corners that I've never really, desired to look around before, in terms of trying to create the best experience for someone else. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's beautiful. That's great, man.
Yeah, because I feel like, I mean, I can go into all the big things, but I think it all boils down to the attention to detail that the country itself has.
Yeah. Do you feel like do they treat you differently because you're Black?
That's a very good question. No, but people always stare. People do stare, but I don't think they stare because I'm Black. I think they stare because I'm different. It's not because I'm Black. I think I'm just different. And even when they stare, I don't feel that there's any malice to them staring. I don't feel that there's any like ill intent. I just think they're looking to understand, or looking because they're intrigued, because, but I don't think I've never felt someone looking at me with discontent.
Right.
So like, here in America, obviously I had felt that before.
I've been wanting to get my podcast off the ground. So, and the reason I agreed to do this was, so I was trying to get my podcast off the ground, but, and I haven't really been able to get my butt out of gear, but that's part of the reason why I agreed to do this, because the fact that you do a podcast inspired me. And, hopefully, I'm going to be able to lean on you, hopefully, for some advice, because again, I love what you're doing. I've listened to your podcast, and just, hopefully, I think that it's going to be a vibe for both of us, and I'd like to have you on to talk about some different things. So, yeah.
Well, man, I'm a guest and I'm a supporter, and I'll help you in any way I can. So, you already know.
Yeah.